I'm reading from the book of Hebrews, the 9th chapter, beginning with the first verse. Now the first covenant had regulations for worship and also an earthly sanctuary. A tabernacle was set up in its first room with a lampstand, the table, and the consecrated bread. This was called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a room called the most holy place, which had the golden altar of incense and the gold-covered ark of the covenant. This ark contained the gold jar of manna, Aaron's staff that had budded, and the stone tablets of the covenant. Above the ark were the cherubim of the glory, overshadowing the atonement cover. But we cannot discuss these things in detail now. When everything had been arranged like this, the priests entered regularly into the outer room to carry on their ministry. But only the high priest entered the inner room, and that only once a year, and never without blood, which he offered for himself and for the sins the people had committed in ignorance. The Holy Spirit was showing by this that the way into the most holy place had not yet been disclosed as long as the first tabernacle was still standing. This is an illustration for the present time, indicating that the gifts and sacrifices being offered were not able to clear the conscience of the worshiper. They are only a matter of food and drink and various ceremonial washings, external regulations, applying until the time of the new order. In three of the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, at the time of Jesus' death, it mentions that the curtain in the temple is torn into. Now this curtain was the curtain that's talked about here that separates the most holy place from the rest of the temple. And the reason that curtain was there was, according to their beliefs, the presence of God dwelt in the most holy place. And it wasn't safe for people to be in the presence of God. If you were not clean and you were in the presence of God, you would be destroyed. And it wasn't because God didn't like you. That's just what happened. You know, it's like if you're wet and you grab an electrical wire, it doesn't matter whether the wire likes you or not, you're going to get shocked. If you walk into the presence of God and you're unclean, according to their understanding, you die. And so the presence of God was kept separate. Now, it's important to remember that the presence of God was kept separate not to protect God, but to protect us. You know, it was kind of locked up. But there are two reasons we lock things up. I have a safe at my house, and I have a whole bunch of important documents in the safe. And it's locked up to protect those documents. It's locked up to keep those documents inside. When I go to bed at night, I go around the house and I check and make sure all the doors are locked. Now, I don't lock the doors to keep my family inside. I lock my doors to keep everyone else outside. So sometimes we lock things up to protect the things we lock up, and sometimes we lock things up, well, I guess a better example is we put people in jail, not to protect the people that are in jail, but to protect the rest of society from those people. God is in the Holy of Holies, according to Jewish tradition, to protect us from being in his presence. Now, we don't have a temple. The temple was destroyed in the year 70. It's never been rebuilt. There's a wall of it standing. There's never been rebuilt, and it's never going to be rebuilt. We don't have a temple, we have a church. And sometimes we get these things confused. Now, I'm going to do a series, and this is the first one in the series, on what do we mean when we say church. And the one I'm talking about today, the definition, is the building. Right? This is our church. And sometimes when we say that, we mean the people in it, but sometimes when we say that, we mean this is our church. It's located at the corner of 421 and 47. It's a physical place. It's a building. So what does it mean to say it's a church? Well, a lot of times we say the church is God's house. And this goes right back to this understanding of the temple as being where God lives. Unfortunately, that answer doesn't work anymore. Now, is God present here in this building? Yes. But God's present everywhere. He's not confined to this building. We don't have to come to church. We don't have to come to this location or any of the churches in Sheridan or Lebanon to find God. Now, maybe we like finding God here, and that's okay. And for some people, they like finding God in the cathedral with the great columns and the stained glass windows. And others like it in the simple, plain country church like we have. But God isn't confined to either of those. This is not a special building because God lives here. Because when I say God lives in the church, I don't mean this building, I mean in our hearts. In the hearts of the people that make up the church. Is what I mean when I say God lives in the church and God works through the church. So, what is this place? Why is it special? The tradition I come from, Quakers, don't call their houses of worship churches. They call them meeting houses because they want to distinguish between the church being the people of the church and the building as just a location. And if we look historically at churches, we go back to the time of Paul, churches met in homes. They didn't have public buildings. And when you're persecuted, public buildings aren't necessarily a good thing. You know, government's looking for you. You don't want to put up a sign that says, "Here we are. Come and get us 10:30 on Sunday morning." So they met in homes. And the church was the people. And I'm going to get more into the church being the people as I go on in this series. But I think that I know you well enough to know that this building holds a special place in your hearts. Am I right? When you talk about the church as this building, there's something special about it. And it has more to do with us than it has to do with God. You see, yes, God is everywhere. And yes, we can find God and we can talk to God anywhere. But sometimes it's hard for us to talk to God anywhere. We get distracted too easily. You know, we can pray on the highway, and there's many times I've had short prayers on the highway, like God protect me from this idiot who just cut me off. But, you know, it's distracting. I can't go deep into prayer when I'm driving, and I shouldn't. I can't go deep into prayer when I'm at work, because I've got responsibilities to work. So, outside of this building, our life kind of distracts us from the presence of God. And we have set aside for us this time in this place to spend time with God. Now, yes, we spend time with God every minute of the day. But we kind of go about that, sometimes not even aware of it, unintentionally. Here, it's intentional. It's like one time my wife and I had an argument, and she said, we don't do anything together. And I said, what do you mean? We've been sitting here together for 4 hours. It's like, yes, but we're not doing anything together. You know, she's on her phone, I'm on mine. We're together, but we're not together. That's how our life is with God most of the time. We are in God's presence, but we're not together with God. This is why church is important. This is why this building is important. There's nothing inherent about this building that makes it sacred. An angel of the Lord, to the best of my knowledge, did not come down and stand on this corner and say, this is holy ground. But several years ago, a group of people got together and decided to build a building on this site and worship God here. And it's become holy ground for those that worship here. It is a place and a time that we intentionally plan to be with God. It is a time and a place where we listen more closely to hear God, where we seek God's presence in our lives more strongly. Yes, there's something to be said, and there's truth when I say God is everywhere. But there is value in setting aside a sacred space. And setting aside a space where we say we are going to be intentional about coming here to meet God. So yes, because of our past, because of our present, because of our future, this is a sacred spot. This is a church where God dwells. Our closing hymn is Where He Leads Me.